What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show, Tournament Strategy Edition. Maybe even a little bit of an on the contrary vibe to it. I know you're used to seeing Josh Engelman here along with Alex Baker, but we've decided let's give the guy a day off of NFL. He's doing a ton of NBA content, pre-produced NBA content. So what do we do instead? Well, very simple solution. Bring on two of the best DFS players that you're going to find out there. Alex Baker at Awesemo DFS and Steve Buzzard at Steve Buzzard on Twitter. You know him as the Colts across the DFS sites. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. And by the way, apologies for going late here. We've got the NBA strategy show prior to this. It's a weird time in the DFS world with the overlap, but we're going to make sure going forward that we're getting these right on time because, well, make it fair to you. Anyway, Alex, what's going on, man?
Not much. Celebrating the return of League of Legends tonight. Just kidding. Excited for NFL Wildcard weekend. It's always great to have two different chances to play a full NFL main slate in a week. So this will be twice as good as your average NFL weekend, if you ask me.
And Steve, well, we have 6 games. Pretty exciting. I don't think this has ever happened before, right? In terms of playoff formatting, that we have 7 teams from each conference getting into the postseason. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to make for a lot of good tournaments this weekend. You've got the 6-game slate you can play. You've got 2 3-game slates, 6 showdowns, nonstop NFL fun, and lots of slates to be able to win some big prizes. So can't wait to see what happens.
Well, we're happy to have all of you guys with us. As always, hit that thumbs up, and more importantly, hit that subscribe button as well. We are at 47,500. Man, 2,500 to go. Less than that, as a matter of fact, till we get to the 50K mark, making that push by Super Bowl. Going to do some big giveaways and all that great stuff, but that shouldn't be the main incentive. The incentive should be if you like the show, if you like the channel, if you like that we put out free content on almost every hour of the day and pour our hearts and souls into this, well, and you think maybe we helped you along the way, win some money, change your process, you name it. Hit that subscribe, join that Awesemo community, and you'll always know when we go live. We'll show up in the recommended feed, the browse feature, all of that stuff more. And, you can hang out with us more. What else could we ask for? What else could you ask for? All right, so let's dive into this. Alex, I'll start with you. I want to get to the news. We'll start on the Saturday slate. Jared Goff questionable here. Sean McVay said that he's making progress, but we still haven't really seen him on the field. And, this is a game that just from the jump, I look at as, even though it has a 42.5 point total, which is, exceedingly low for 2021, feels like another game that goes under. The Seahawks games have gone under, I think, in every game since week 10. The Rams have gone under in most games this season. Divisional matchups tend to trend towards the under as well. And now the Rams have a very, very good defense, top 5 in both run and pass defense. But their pass offense and their offense in general could completely stall out if they're without Jared Goff. It just feels like this has a recipe to go low scoring. But what are you doing right now, just from a tournament standpoint, with all of this uncertainty surrounding Jared Goff?
Yeah, Jared Goff's injury is going to be really tough because the team is obviously keeping it pretty hush-hush. Who's going to start on Saturday, tomorrow? So I think it's really a tricky situation because if Goff starts, you might like guys like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Cam Akers as good tournament plays. But if Wolford starts, they're probably going to run the ball more with him being a mobile quarterback. So that would hurt the production of the receivers. And then Cam Akers wouldn't get all those rushing attempts like he would otherwise. So that would really hurt all the Rams players. So, man, I'm at a loss at what to do here other than just maybe utilize late swap. I'd be curious to hear, Steve, what your strategy is here with not knowing who the QB is.
Yeah, I think it is a really a tough situation. I think that the nice thing is you're going to have really good ownership on both Wolford or Goff, whichever option it's going to be. I don't think too many people are going to, be willing to make any swap practices for them. And also with the Q tag, I don't think people are going to be really willing to take that chance on the front end. So I think you can get some really good ownership opportunities with both of those guys. So they're not my favorite choices, but I definitely am going to, you could set in Goff as your option. And then if you need to swap down to Wolford and, swap another guy here or there to make things work, I think that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, Steve, the Seahawks allowed 300-plus passing yards in 8 of their first 9 games. They haven't allowed a 300-yard passing game in each of their last 7. Now, if we're being fair, they've placed a lot of inferior opponents if you're talking about their offense. But what are we like when you look at this Seahawks team? We're already talking about Jared Goff, Wolford. Who knows what's going on there? The ownership likely going to be low. But the Seahawks on the other side of this one, like, what are we making of them right now with the complete almost transformation that we've seen over the past 7 weeks? And I'm not willing to say it's a particularly good one.
Yeah. I don't know if they're just kind of been coasting it a little bit, or if once it gets here into the playoffs, they're going to start to let Russ cook again. But it is a little bit of a concern. That said, you also see Wilson, at pretty low ownership as well. The numbers that that we have on the site are 13% is the last number I had on Wilson, and that's pretty darn low for the upside that he has. I know there's a lot of concerns. One, about him not passing as much, like you mentioned, the fact that the Rams defense is pretty solid and that they're going to try to slow down the game with their quarterback situation. But I have no problems at that type of ownership giving Wilson another chance. And we know for a fact that Metcalf and Lockett can blow up any slate pretty much any time. It's mostly been Metcalf throughout the year, so I don't have a problem getting pretty heavy on him. But Lockett, he's been kind of under the radar, and he's going to get a little bit lower ownership. Although it's interesting that Metcalf continues to be priced lower than Lockett, so that's an interesting fact as well.
Yeah, Alex, it's pretty wild that the first half of the season, Seahawks games had an average total of 64 points. Now they have an average of 39 points over their last 8 games. So, look, I'm expressing some concerns about this game being just a slog fest with not a slugfest, slog, if that's even a thing. But you know where I'm going with this. If that's the case, it does feel like one where you could just see a complete void of offense. But there's only 3 games here, and Steve's talking about some low ownership that in tournaments could take you a long way. Where do you side on this one when it comes to just getting there because of low ownership, or buying into the low ownership and trying to get elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle, I'd say like 3 of these 6 teams on Saturday have pretty solid defenses, the Rams, Washington, and Tampa. So Seattle going up against one of the better ones, that is a spot where it's going to be a little tougher for them to succeed. But, I mean, they got a ton of talent, and they have one of the tightest rotations in the league at receiver. So, I mean, Lockett and Metcalf, that's pretty much all you're getting for fantasy. That makes it really easy to pinpoint who to put in your lineup. Greg Olsen is supposed to be coming back, so that really makes it tough to pick out a tight end from the Seahawks. But yeah, I think the stack is solid, and if I'm not exactly sure why Russ would be so well owned, but that looks pretty nice.
Another spot too, Steve, where you've got some questionable players is in Washington. Alex Smith, questionable to play, hasn't been practicing. He did play last week, and I know he's banged up a bit, but so is this entire team, at least offensively. It's weird, though, because you have Ron Rivera saying that they might go with a quarterback rotation against Tampa Bay in the playoffs. I don't know how much of this is just, nonsensical coach speak to throw Bruce Arians and company off, but it's a weird situation where Alex Smith is questionable, Antonio Gibson's questionable, but we expect him and Loughran, who's also questionable, to play. I just don't know how many of these guys are going to be at full strength or even close to that in a game against Tampa, where they're almost certainly going to have to put some points on the board to win. And by points, I mean, more than 15 to 17 points.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to believe that it's coach speak on this rotation, unless things really go, haywire at the start of the game. Even so, I'm not sure that there's really, you would say that any of the backups there, Allen or Heineke, really are a better comeback option for them. So I got to believe that they're going with Alex Smith unless he just can't go at 100%. So his ownership is low as well, but I don't know that I see myself get into him as much as a low-owned Russell Wilson, for instance. Just Terry McLaurin, like you said, he's still questionable. He came back last week, but he only played 81% of the snaps, which was a pretty big decrease. He only had 40 yards on 8 targets, which was about 60% of his normal production. So that's pretty weak as well. That was a must-win game for them. So yeah, you're easy to say, okay, McLaurin's going to be 100% and he's going to be playing all the snaps this week because it's the playoffs. But that was pretty much a playoff game for them last week. So it is a concern for me there still. And even on top of that, we've seen Alex Smith really prefer the check down options to J.D. McKissic instead of McLaurin as well. McKissic gets about 42% more targets per snap with Alex Smith than he did with all the rest of the quarterbacks. So you might be able to take a shot on McKissic with his low ownership, but if you can't really stack Alex Smith with McLaurin very safely, I don't think I'm really a big favor of stacking up the rest of the passing offense.
Yeah, Alex, I'm having a tough time with this game because, as you'll hear us talk about a lot, there's only 3 games, so we can't be as picky as we were maybe last week where we had 15, right? And like people talk a lot about Doug Peterson and the Eagles tanking. What about Washington in that game? It sure as shit looked like they were trying to lose, and I'm not saying they were, right? We know they weren't, but that was an awful display of offensive football, and I don't know if they're healthy. And if Tom Brady's thrown 40 touchdowns this year, I'll try and get to the point, but I want to try and express this so you can answer in the best way possible. Tom Brady's thrown 40 touchdowns this year. That offense is absolutely humming right now. I know it's in Washington. I know it's cold, but Brady has plenty of experience playing out there in the cold in Foxborough. Like, what is our approach with the Washington football team, given so many of these, external factors that make it so difficult to evaluate them this week?
I feel pretty confident about maybe taking some shots. I don't know if it's the best strategy this week because, they are one of the teams that's projected to not really put up many points with this 18 team total. But Alex Smith, it's not like Taylor Heineke played any snaps last week, so I don't know if I buy into that quarterback rotation. It sounds like coach speak, like Steve was saying. And then Terry McLaurin, although his snap count wasn't as high, he did run routes on 34 of 35 passing plays last week. They took him out for the running plays. So if he wasn't on the field, you could be pretty sure what they were about to do. Hopefully with another 6 days to rest, he should be closer to full strength. But the high ankle sprains, those can be pretty damaging. There's not really any guys that you can feel totally confident in on this slate, though. So I think that taking some shots on Washington, if no one's going to be on, that makes sense.
You know what one of my biggest concerns is, Alex, and it's not a concern about a certain player, but it's a concern that I don't have a good read on this backfield. And here's what I mean, right? The Tampa Bay Bucks allowed 80.6 rushing yards per game this year. That was a league low by 10 full yards. That's how good they were at preventing opposing rushing attacks from getting anything going for almost 16 straight weeks. If Antonio Gibson is healthy and comes in and he's over this turf toe, is he going to be the pass catching back and J.D. McKissic doesn't get as much opportunity? Or if Tampa Bay does fall behind, do we see J.D. McKissic continue to get the work? Because he was targeted 8 times last week, but I think a lot of these big games from J.D. McKissic have been when Gibson was out or he wasn't playing or he was limited. And I feel like we might have to get something like that right. If they fall behind and J.D. McKissic gets peppered with targets, that could be a spot you might want to be on. I just don't know where to turn.
Yeah, J.D. McKissic makes some sense. I'm not totally fading Antonio Gibson, though. He is the number one guy rushing the ball. I mean, it's a tough matchup, but it's not like we haven't seen guys have success. I mean, Atlanta last week ran for 130 yards, it looks like, so that was pretty solid. And we all know that he's a pretty explosive guy. J.D. McKissic is kind of their comeback and third down running back. So he also like seems to fit in with the potential game script here. So I think he's solid. I don't have a strong lean one way or the other.
Okay. I don't have any issues with Cam Sims either. It's not a sexy pick whatsoever, but he's got more upside than Steven Sims. I don't know if McLaurin's at full strength, and Kim Sims has played 100% of snaps in back-to-back weeks, so you could certainly do worse than that. You know, Steve, on the other side of this game, it doesn't get much easier. We're projecting them for considerably more points, right? They have a 26.5 total to the Washington's 18.5, or 26.25 and 18.25, sorry. But there are so many options on this team, from Gronk, who has gotten in shape and looked much better, a downfield threat. Antonio Brown has looked better since he reemerged in the NFL. Chris Godwin, and then Mike Evans had that nasty hyperextension of his knee in the end zone. He's still questionable. He hasn't been ruled out for this game. So if he plays, is he going to be a decoy or is he going to be active? This is one that's really tough too.
Yes. Yeah. For opening weekend of playoffs, it's pretty amazing how many big questionable players there are. But the team has been tough all year to really peg who's going to be the big guy to get, and Antonio Brown joining has made it no easier. We're not seeing a huge amount of ownership on any of the wide receivers. Brown, Evans, and Godwin are all kind of in the same range. And they're not super high. So that's definitely an option to go to any of those. Actually looks like Gronkowski is in about the same range as well. So you could certainly take a shot on any of those. If Evans is ruled out, which I'm guessing at this point we're not going to know, because that's the last game on the slate. And unless we get some overnight news, I have a feeling that this is going to come down to then to know, and you're going to have to just take a shot before lock. So what I would probably do is, if you want to take on some of the Mike Evans risk, you could certainly swap to Antonio Brown afterwards. I think Antonio Brown would be one of the biggest beneficiaries of Evans not playing. Antonio Brown did come up to 84% of the snaps last game, with Evans only playing 16%. That was Antonio Brown's high for the season. So I think he'll be a pretty good benefit from that opportunity. Also saw Tyler Johnson tick up a little bit. So just be careful if you think Scotty Miller is going to get any extra work if Mike Evans is out. I have a feeling that Miller's time will still be pretty limited. So I don't think I'm going to take any shots on Tyler Johnson, maybe in a showdown setting, but just watch that out for Scotty Miller. But overall, I think I don't really love this Tampa Bay passing game at the end of the day, even so. So I'll probably be about slightly under the field on those guys. And the major opportunity probably is with Mike Evans, who is probably worth taking a few shots on just because his ownership is going to be really low as the last game on the slate.
Do you like the ground game, whether it be Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette against Washington as big time 8.5-point favorites?
Yeah, I think Ronald Jones is pretty interesting. I'll definitely have a fair amount of him. Unfortunately, we see him at 42% ownership on our latest ownership run, which is one of the highest on this Saturday slate. One thing we have seen on this size of a slate, 3-game slates, is you typically see the ownership get too high for the very top end guys. So if you see the ownership for the top one or two guys at every single position, more than likely you're only going to have 2 or 3 of those guys hit and pay off their value. So I'm often going to be fading those guys. That said, Ronald Jones, I don't know that he's the one that I'm going to fade the most. I think Ronald Jones is a pretty pretty solid overall option for this team. And if you're going against all of the folks that have Tom Brady, that might be a little bit of a leverage play as well.
How do you dissect this Tampa Bay team, Alex, with Mike Evans being questionable and his status, even if he plays, or what capacity he'll be playing in, is still unknown?
Yeah, I think you got to be pretty worried about it because the injury looked somewhat serious. And then, there's no guarantee that they won't rush him back in a limited capacity. I mean, they are incredibly big favorites versus Washington, so maybe that would be part of the decision. But as Steve was saying, Antonio Brown was the clear beneficiary of the injury. He's been the one that's been targeted the most on the field when he's been on it. It's just the playing time hasn't been 100%. So now I think we got to bump up Antonio Brown. And he'd be kind of my go-to target on this team, given that Chris Godwin is more expensive. One thing you could do in tournaments is just make sure you don't have Mike Evans and Antonio Brown in the same lineup. Then Antonio Brown's an easy late swap from Mike Evans. Mike Evans is $6,500 on DraftKings, $7,600 on FanDuel. Antonio Brown's cheaper on both. So you could do that in Fantasy Cruncher by setting a rule that you don't have both of them in the same lineup.
It's a great call. And even for hand building, right? Like if you're hand building lineups, just if you're, let's say you're stacking Tampa Bay, it's a great point, Alex, because from a Fantasy Cruncher standpoint, no question, it's easy. But from an overall theory, like a theory standpoint is, you look at this Tampa team, there still are a lot of places that Brady can go to with the ball. So it's not like the only way to stack this team, maybe Minnesota, where you go Thielen and Jefferson. It's not like you're downgraded if Thielen is out and you have to go to Olabisi Johnson or something. Your downgrade from Evans is Antonio Brown.
Yeah, you got to feel pretty confident about downgrading to Antonio Brown.
Exactly. Yeah, Steven, maybe that's a way to approach this. Like with the quarterback position is a little bit different. Like you said, Wolford to Goff. I don't really have much interest in Taylor Heineke, but with Tampa Bay, given their just wealth of options in the passing game, I think there are ways that we can get around this, and we're going to need to because it is the latest game on this slate, and all of them are spaced out by 3 to 4 hours each.
Yeah, I think just making sure that you set up your lineups appropriately is going to be a big thing. So it is a little bit tougher with the quarterback position because a lot of times with the quarterback, you are tending to stack them with another player or 2 or 3 and their opponents. So it's really is a tougher thing with the quarterbacks, but you can still switch those around too. So I think even if you're building a lineup with Mike Evans and want to swap to Antonio Brown, 6,500 to 6,100, for instance, on the DraftKings numbers that we said, even leaving $400 on the table at the end of the day is not a big thing on a 3-game slate. So I wouldn't even be super worried about that factor.
Steve, I've asked Alex this, I feel like every time we come in and we talk about a short slate. So let me ask you, just from a strategy standpoint, because it's not On the Contrary, it's a strategy show, but it's better to put it in this time slot anyway. Whenever we do On the Contrary, the normal slot at Friday, it gets lost in the mix. So we're taking a roundabout course here and trying to hit on everything we can. But from a strategic standpoint, when you have these short slates, on main slates, on bigger slates recently, we've seen running back, wide receiver with no quarterback. Multiple weeks we saw the same team, running back, wide receiver, twice in the same lineup. So two teams, 2 running back, wide receiver, no quarterback for either of them win it. We've seen a lot of weird stuff. And in these smaller slates, 2 to 3 game slates, we've seen, Buffalo with 6 Bills, 5 Bills and Bills defense. We've seen some crazy builds and roster constructions win millions of dollars over the past however many weeks we've had these slates. do you look at them differently in that you're willing to expand what you're willing to do? Maybe you don't set as hard of restrictions for how many players you play against the defense. What would some recommendations be for people playing on these 3-game slates? Because I know you've had a lot of success with showdowns in the smaller slates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you have to really expand your horizon. So especially the defense or offensive players against your defense is a great example that you mentioned. So typically on a normal slate, you would limit that to 0 and maybe 1 if it's the right situation. But on a smaller slate like this, it's a very good chance that a defensive touchdown is what ends up winning the game. And it doesn't even have to be a good defensive performance, just a defensive touchdown. And that defensive touchdown could even force the opposing quarterback and opposing offense to be a lot more aggressive, which makes them a good play as well. So I definitely have no problem playing 2 or even potentially 3 offensive players against my defense when it comes to a slate this size. So that would probably be my biggest thing that I would tell people to watch out for. If you're going to, a lineup builder, a lot of the times you may have your default set to 0, and that often will affect, how people are going to build their lineups. If they just even forget to change that, or even if you're hand building, you're just getting in the habit of setting up and saying, I can't choose the Colts defense if I'm playing, Josh Allen or something like that. So definitely take that into consideration.
Sure. And game flows are weird, Alex. We've seen spots where a defense will grab a pick 6 and get a bunch of turnovers early in the game, and the opponent has to play catch up. So your defense finishes with 15 points. They still allow 28, and the 2 guys that you played against them end up going off.
Definitely, yeah. I think there's a pretty good chance that no defense really excels too. So right. it might not even matter that much which defense you have and how many offensive players there are versus them. One of my short slate strategies, I think there's some hesitance in a large slate to stack your QB with the running back from the same team, because people are hoping for these shootouts where there are a ton of passing attempts. But one thing that'll happen in the short slates is that a team, the opposing team just doesn't get much going. There aren't very many plays. That leads to the leading team to have a lot more plays. And usually what happens is they'll run up a lead and then they'll start running the ball more. So I think stacking up your quarterback with 2 to 3 receivers and the running back is not a bad strategy.
Sure. Thanksgiving Day, wasn't Deshaun Watson, Duke Johnson the winner on the Millie Maker? I think so.
I can't remember. Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah.
Nice.
Josh Allen, Devin Singletary on the Saturday Night Football a few weeks ago. Yeah, there's myriad examples of that being the case. So great stuff from both of you. And I think pricing is a lot softer this week too, where if you're playing the quarterback, it's not like it's hard to get a running back and a bunch of wide receivers on the same team in there anyway. So let's close it out with Indy and Buffalo. Then we'll talk Sunday slate. Steve, the Indianapolis Colts are 6.5-point dogs, and Buffalo, I know 6.5 points is a decent amount for a good Colts team. Sorry, it's 6 now. So it's 51-point total. I got to tell you, we're going to give our top bets at the end of the show. And as we usually do on the contrary, we'll steal a little of that for this one, take a little inspiration. We'll do our top pivots and our top fades of the week. But I still like Buffalo here. Until you can show me that this offense can be slowed down, I'm going to assume that they can't. So what are your thoughts on the Bills right now? They've got a couple questionable players. Stephon Diggs has been limited. I don't see any reason why he's not going to play. And then Cole Beasley is questionable as well with that knee. I saw someone saying he was out in chat, but I didn't see that yet. Is he out?
I couldn't find it.
I couldn't find it either. So anyway, Steve, what are your thoughts on the Bills this week?
Yeah, I haven't seen Beasley out either, but that could be news if he is. My assumption is that he will be out. but I just haven't seen it as official. So the thing I mentioned earlier, you have to be really wary of the very top-owned players, and Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are the top-owned players at quarterback and wide receiver. So I'd be really careful about those two. That said, they are the best values on the slate. And if you are going to play them, which I would recommend if you're playing something like 3 lineups, I'd probably play those guys in at least one of those 3 and maybe even 2. But if you are playing those 2 guys together, you got to be very different other places. That means not playing Chris Carson. That means not playing Ronald Jones. You're going to have to do something a little bit different in order to set yourself apart, because the ownership for these 2 guys are going to be really high. So I think I will be taking some shots. I do think that you should be taking those shots. I think the Colts defense is good, but Josh Allen and Diggs, I think, are a pretty dynamic duo that is going to be, raw points. They're going to be pretty tough to beat in most cases. And then on top of that, you even have John Brown, especially if Cole Beasley is going to miss. John Brown coming back from his injury. I don't recall how many snaps he ended up with last week, but he had a pretty he was pretty involved. They kept the offense in the game.
47%, Steve.
What was that?
47%.
Okay, yep. So that's not too bad for his first game back in that game that they only played, not the whole game with the starters, but the starters did all the work in that amount of time. So I think he's also going to be a really good option as well. So you could very easily stack up Allen, Diggs, and Brown, and even Isaiah McKenzie. If Cole Beasley is out, I think I wouldn't put him in, probably in my 2 or 3 lineups. But if I was multi-mass entering, I would definitely consider him. I had him in a few of my lineups last week until we got all that news that the main offense was going to play the whole game, and I backed them out. And unfortunately, that was a bad choice as he blew up. So I think he's going to be heavily involved as well if Beasley doesn't play. Certainly, Gabriel Davis will be as well too. So you have a lot of options for that. That Bills offense and the passing game in particular. I'm not as excited about the running game, though. That's going to be low owned, so it could be a contrarian play if you want to get some leverage by taking on one of those guys. But I think the chance of them really crushing is not as high.
Are you buying into the Bills this week, Alex? Because we know this game is going to be super popular given the 2 crappy, not bad games, but 2 lower projected scoring games that we just hit on.
Definitely. Buffalo's passing offense has been incredible this year. And to top it off, they don't run the ball very often, only 38% of the time. So when Buffalo does score, it's more likely to be through the air. So that gives you a lot of confidence in these guys. I mean, Colts defense is solid. So the matchup's not really a huge factor. It's kind of the baseline being so high. And Cole Beasley, although, there's some chance he's out. Man, he's been having a monster season, catching 75% of his passes, getting targeted a ton. So people are going to be off him because of the questionable tag. Like, that could be an interesting contrarian play. And then if he's out, you can just swap to John Brown.
Are you at all interested in the ground game? The Colts, I mentioned Tampa Bay allowing only 80 yards per game on the ground. The Colts allowing 90 yards per game with the second lowest yards per carry on the season. And Buffalo doesn't really like to run the football to begin with. Yeah,
definitely. I think that they might be trap plays because people, obviously, they like the Bills, but the rushing attempts are split, and there just aren't that many of them to begin with. So probably fades for me, but what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity is just a game theory perspective. You got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs as huge ownerships, and both Singletary and Moss coming in below 10%. So that's your best option. But and their prices are low too, so you could get in some really great options elsewhere, plus all the chalk. But overall, I don't think it's a super exciting option.
Alex, the Bills have a solid pass defense, but again, easily the highest total on the slate. There's a good possibility that if Josh Allen and company continue to obliterate opposing defenses, or at least put up enough points, Indy's going to have to fight back through the air. Jonathan Taylor's getting a lot of opportunity. He's been great lately to close out his rookie campaign, but T.Y. Hilton's looked pretty good too. And while Phillip Rivers has not proven that he has a high ceiling in the fantasy space, do we have interest in getting to some Rivers stacks and then running it back with a couple Buffalo options and hoping that, that Indy has to throw enough to make a difference and ends up, cheap Phillip Rivers ends up getting us enough elsewhere to make it work?
Yeah, definitely. I think the Colts stack is pretty intriguing. They throw out about an average rate, so pretty good. And then their efficiency, although we haven't seen too many Rivers, GPP takedowns, he has averaged 7.7 yards per attempt, which is solidly above average. So I think that that gives you encouragement for stacking. But then the targets are pretty split between the different positions. So Hilton, Pittman, and Pascal, although they're getting all the snaps at wide receiver, the number of targets for each one isn't so exciting. So there's a little bit of a crapshoot trying to guess who's going to get the receiving yards this week.
Okay. Kevin Stadler, $5 super chat. Thanks, brother. He says, Steve, do you think using the boost function on the higher total games might be even more important in this wild card weekend context?
Using the boost is more important. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's the boost a player if one player is used in the lineup type thing.
I think it is the boost function just to boost specific players in a certain game, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Overall, I think you should be stacking more often together if that's the main question there. So I think typically I stack quite a bit in a normal slate, but on a smaller slate, you're really hoping for just one or two games really to blow up, and then one game to kind of bomb, and then you're in a good spot. So overall, I would tend to more likely stack heavier.
Okay. So Steve, let me stick with you for a second here. The Colts have a good ground attack. They have a pretty good defense, and the passing game is kind of weak, but Michael Pittman's cheap. T.Y. Hilton's pretty cheap. What are you doing with their passing game?
Yeah, I got to go to my man T.Y. Hilton. I was on the T.Y. Hilton train when no one liked him and everyone said he was dust. Now everyone loves him. But his popularity is pretty high. Even so, I think he's a really good run back with Josh Allen and the passing game. So that will be one of my favorite stacks for this slate. I don't love Phillip Rivers as much. What we often have been seeing is Jacoby Brissett coming in for vulturing any really short touchdowns. And then I think that you also see the running backs, Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, involved pretty often as they get in the red zone as well. So pretty low on Phillip Rivers in general, and would rather take the Colts receivers as kind of run back options instead of stacked with Rivers.
Okay. I'll say too, if Cole Beasley does sit, I think you could see more Isaiah McKenzie. He saw a lot of opportunity out of the slot last week, but I also don't know how much, maybe if they're all playing a full game as they didn't last week, maybe you see Diggs running more routes out of the slot, getting more snaps out of the slot, and just having Gabriel Davis and John Brown outside. I don't know, honestly, but I would assume that McKenzie could be fine. And then, Alex, one more thing, just to close this game out and this slate out with Nyheim Hines, he's probably someone that in a game, if they're playing from behind, and of course we're trying to predict game script here, which can be very difficult, probably gets worked in quite a bit and would be a lot more valuable than if this game is lower scoring and sees a lower scoring, closer game.
Yeah, Naheem Hines is he's a tricky guy to pin down because he's had such big games. A lot of them were when Taylor was out, but I mean the talent is really solid. When he is on the field, he's been really good. So probably not my favorite option because it seems like Jonathan Taylor has got a stranglehold over, I guess not a stranglehold, but he's getting a solid majority of the rushing attempts. So that makes it a little bit tougher to nail down when you should have Hines.
Okay. Anything else on this game, Steve, just given that it's going to be an extremely popular one for this week?
I don't think so. Probably I'm going to be underweight on Jonathan Taylor, who's another popular guy. That's not really worked for me quite a bit this year, but probably give it another shot.
All right. My final thoughts on this slate, because we're going to take it over to the Sunday slate, is Cam Akers plays. I expect another massive workload from him. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. I only throw that out there because he was coming off that high ankle sprain and it was like 1 week removed from what should be a 6-week injury, but he practiced fully. So I'm like, he's going to play. And if that's the case, we could be in business just because he's been targeted a little bit more recently too. The workload's been through the roof and Malcolm Brown has seriously fallen out of favor. And then I think we hit on everything else for this one. Alex, any closing thoughts on this Saturday slate?
I think this one's intriguing because we got some of these late swap situations. So keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. And then, I mean, it's hard to say that like you can't stack any of these teams. They all look somewhat reasonable. So it should be a lot of fun. But I guess the core principle is just make sure you got a couple of contrarian plays in there. Make sure you do the stacking, and then with stacking, I might not force a run back this week. I think on the short slates, there's a good possibility that one team will just kind of dominate the game and be the winning stack.
Okay. 1 up, 1 to go. Before we do, though, guys, you see it at the bottom of the screen. 21 days of Awesemo Plus for $20. It's the New Year promotion we're doing, and it's a huge one. It's everything on the site, from the top stack tool, from the boom or bust tool, more importantly, the player projections, the ownership projections, the lineup builder, all of these built by Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, tools that he uses as well. We don't just, throw a name on them and say, oh, this is what they are. No, these are the real deal. These have helped a lot of people win a lot of money, including these guys. So we'd love to have you come check it out. $21 or 21 days for $20. Everything on the site. If you have questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Lafayette_D. My DMs are open. Go to awesemo.com/promos. And while you're at it, if you are interested in making, because this is an investment, right? This is an investment that you're making. And if you're looking to do a longer term investment, we're doing 20% off the entire year for everything on the site. If you use the promo code HAPPY, HAPPY, that gets you everything off on the entire site. 20% off everything on the entire site for a full calendar year. And you can add the Fantasy Cruncher add-on to that as well. So check both of them out. If you haven't been over to awesemo.com yet, we got some great free content, but our premium stuff is the best in the industry, the preeminent tools and content that you're going to find in the DFS space. So check it out. Hit us up if you have any questions. 2021 gets you 21 days for $20. Happy gets you 20% off everything on the site for the full calendar year. All right. Eric says, I'm going to slide into those DMs. As long as you got something, relevant to say, I got you, brother. All right. Sunday slate. Steve, I'll go to you first. The biggest thing to me here is Alvin Kamara is going to play. We know that. That was pretty significant. If he played Saturday, he would not have been able to play. A.J. Brown didn't practice yesterday, so who knows what the hell's going on there. Allen Robinson didn't practice yesterday either. Like, these are some big-time players. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't practice yesterday, dealing with that knee. Robinson's dealing with a hamstring, which can really wear on you. And A.J. Brown's got the hand and knee injury. Maybe they're going to play. Maybe they're just getting a day off. But it seems kind of strange, so close to the biggest game of the season for these guys.
Yeah. I think overall it is pretty surprising that they're. I think it's the same thing we're seeing on the other slate, that the number of injuries at this point of the season in the playoffs is pretty unusual. So I think it's going to open up some opportunities for you, especially if you're playing the double slate Saturday and Sunday for late swapping. There's going to be people that are going to be very hesitant to play any of these guys that aren't out there on practice at the end of the week. That is just how it is. People are very hesitant to play those guys, and rightfully so. You don't want to, be left without anyone in your lineup. So I think that's a good way to strategize the slate, just like last one, is make sure that you're planning appropriately and taking some shots on those guys that are questionable, but having a backup plan in case that doesn't work out.
Well, Alex, one player that will be active and hasn't been active for the majority of the season is Michael Thomas. And his ownership has come up throughout the week. I was surprised by where it was at earlier, but now you've got it all the way up to 41% on DraftKings. We do have Sunday ownership at awesemo.com. It's been posted under the Sunday slate. So now Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas are 2 and 3 respectively in projected ownership for this slate. Very interesting Saints team when he gets healthy.
Yeah, I think Michael Thomas, when he's been healthy, has been pretty productive. And especially like when Taysom Hill was quarterback, he seemed to excel when the rest of the team was struggling. So I think the 3-week absence, I think, was mostly just to make sure he's ready for the playoffs. So I'm not really making much of the fact that he missed those 3 games.
That was maintenance for sure.
Yeah. So I think if people are a little bit worried because he hasn't played in a while, he makes a lot of sense as someone that should be targeted a good amount in this offense. And it does hurt Kamara a little bit that Kamara seemed to get like 1 million targets in the games that Thomas missed, but still a fantastic play.
Yeah, Steve, Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, again, very high ownership. Michael Thomas, the reason for this is if he was, let's say he was the same price as another top receiver on this, like if he was really, there's no top price receivers, but if he was up in that same range as like the DK Metcalf's not very expensive either. You know where I'm going. If he was an expensive receiver like he was last year, for example, there's a better way to put it. Then I think his ownership will be way down because he hasn't done much this year. But this is still a guy that had 1,700 plus yards and like 140 receptions last season at $6,300 against the Bears as a 10.5 point favorite.
Yeah, at 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. This is a guy that last year, to your point, was normally around 9,000 or more. So he's a great value. He rates out as the top value on my value rankings for the week. So certainly am a big fan of taking some shots on him. I think that, Drew Brees is going to be looking for him consistently throughout the game. I think he's also looking for Kamara as well. So they're going to be battling each other out for those looks. But I think we kind of could see the same New Orleans team that we've seen in the past, where Drew Brees can very effectively hit Kamara and Thomas with some of their short passes and move the ball pretty well. So you're not going to get any type of ownership discounts. Thomas and Kamara are both very highly owned, so that's not going to do you any favors. And if you take a shot with them, you're going to have to be different elsewhere. But I think it's a pretty good idea to stack up Michael Thomas, especially if you're only playing a couple of lineups. I think Brees and Thomas is a good place to start. If you are trying to get really different, I think Emmanuel Sanders is a good thing. So we are assuming that Michael Thomas is all the way back, and I tend to agree that that's the case. But there is a possibility that he's not, and also we know that Kamara is going to get a lot of ownership coming off of his 6 touchdown game. So if Emmanuel Sanders is the one that actually scores a couple of touchdowns at a super low price. He could be the guy that garners all the leverage and really kind of shifts the shape of the slate.
Last year in the first round of the postseason, Michael Thomas was $9,300.
Yeah.
This is not exactly a situation where he's fallen off a cliff and he stinks now. I know Drew Brees isn't necessarily the same, but Thomas doesn't rely on the deep ball anyway. So to me, it just seems like an insane price. But I like that. Just a contrarian view at an Emmanuel Sanders player or somebody else, because the Thomas and Kamara ownership is absurdly high right now, although it does make a lot of sense. Alex, that very popular Alvin Kamara is going to keep Derrick Henry from going through the roof. Last year, we saw him come out there in that divisional game against a Baltimore team that had a bye week, and he racked up ridiculous numbers. Basically, all of Tennessee's offense in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, like 68, 70%, were all on the back of Derrick Henry. He's around 35% projected ownership to Kamara's 50%. And he's $700 more than Alvin Kamara, which is another reason he's not the same. Do we go back there to the same matchup that he annihilated last year, coming off now a 2,000-yard season? Or does Derrick Henry concern you without pass-catching ability at a $9K plus salary?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty comparable because although Henry doesn't catch passes, I mean, Kamara doesn't get all the rushing attempts. So
right.
It's kind of a wash there. Henry's been having a fantastic season. I mean, will this game set up well for running the ball 30 times? That's a big question mark, I think. But if they do win this game or it's competitive for most of it, Henry's in a really good spot. But I do feel like he's been getting quite lucky with his fantasy scoring. I mean, if you break down the 2,000 yards, the 16 games, I mean, that's like 125 per game, I think. So, I mean, that's fantastic. But 125 yards is, I mean, that's only equaling about 20 fantasy points. Or I guess, about 20 on DraftKings. So that isn't anything that's going to make or break your day if he doesn't have a day where he overperforms again.
Yeah, the 100-yard bonus is certainly helpful, but I see what you're saying for sure. Steve, the whole Tennessee Titans team has been interesting all year to me because you have Derrick Henry, and then you have an underrated offense that can put up some pretty explosive games with Tannehill's arm, with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, even guys like Jonnu Smith. They do have some weapons. It's not just the Derrick Henry-led Tennessee Titans. They, when forced to throw, or even when not forced to throw, can make it happen. And Ryan Tannehill has proven that this man can use his legs as well. He had multiple rushing touchdown games just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So exactly how Alex was saying, all these things could go right just so that Derrick Henry doesn't blow up the slate. Unfortunately, we've seen him blow up the slate time and time again this year. I think he single-handedly cost me probably a new house this year with how much money he's lost me by fading him week in and week out. But I think I'm going to have to try it again. And hopefully this is the week. I'm holding you to this one, Alex, that he's not going to blow up the slate. But I would rather take a shot at fading Henry again and instead, taking a shot on the passing game. All the things that you're saying about the passing game, I think, are really solid. I think A.J. Brown, his ownership is quite low. Actually, it looks like it's ticking up a little bit right now versus what it was earlier in the week. But I think he's a pretty good option, especially if people are going to be off of him a little bit because of that questionable tag and not practicing the last few weeks. That might bring his ownership back down. So I do like that. Corey Davis has kind of slid under the radar a little bit. We always hear about A.J. Brown because he's kind of the favorite of everybody, but Corey Davis has had just as good or better year than A.J. Brown. So I like both of those guys in a stack, especially as kind of run back options with the Baltimore side.
What about the passing attack for you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, they've been really great when they get the attempts. So if you don't have Henry, you're assuming that they do pass the ball at a higher rate potentially, so that makes sense. Probably not a team where you play Henry and AJ Brown, but I guess that could work. But the passing, I mean, they've only passed the ball about 48% of the time at neutral game scripts. So the game script can easily get away from Tannehill and Brown and Davis, but if it doesn't, then they look like really good plays.
What about on the other side with Baltimore? Mark Andrews, I was really surprised to see that his ownership was higher than anyone else, projected for higher than anyone else on this entire slate. Alex, it's 60% over. We're using our Awesemo.com ownership projections. That is very, very high. But the Tennessee Titans defense has just been an absolute sieve this season. And the amount of high scoring games you've seen, it's absurd. Last week, 79, 54, 71. I'm just going in order. I'm not even picking these games out. They have been in some wildly high scoring affairs, which, really benefits their opposition. And this week that could be the Baltimore Ravens.
Definitely. It is a little jarring to see Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews be like the slate's chalk. So I'm not exactly sure like how that's possible, but it does look like Mark Andrews. I mean, he's by far the best tight end on the slate when you're comparing him to guys like Jonnu Smith and Ebron. So, and the price tag doesn't break the bank either at 5,200 on a short slate. That's pretty easy to afford. So he looks like a great play, but if this ownership's close to 60%, that's a big red flag.
Steve, what about you? Baltimore, high total, should be a relatively high scoring game. 54.5 point total is by far the highest of any game happening on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, I think Mark Andrews, if his ownership does stay up that high, he gets into that fade territory, and you just kind of hope that one of those other cheap options scores, or you need your money elsewhere. But in general, I think hopefully it'll come down a little bit and we can take some shots on him, because there is a pretty big gap on his raw points versus the other tight ends on the slate. So I would like to go to him if possible, but just keep in mind his ownership could get out of control. Lamar Jackson, I think, is definitely the best overall quarterback option on this slate. Talked about Drew Brees as a pretty good option. Lamar Jackson, I think, is the only one that will top him. But overall, I think the ownerships are pretty good on the quarterbacks. So I don't have a super huge lean that one is like a super great play overall. But Lamar Jackson would be my favorite. And you could stack him up with Mark Andrews. You could stack him up with the other high-owned Marquise Brown, like you said. It just doesn't feel great because those guys haven't had super stellar years.
And if you've seen on the screen, Tyler Zander producing today's show, bringing up our Odd Shopper game pages. They are sweet. They have everything you need from a sports betting standpoint, and it's entirely free. It's oddshopper.awesemo.com, or just go to awesemo.com. You'll see the Odd Shopper at the top that you can click on, and it'll take you there. You're talking everything, right? From the total, the sides, the money line, but not just that, where the action is, where the money's coming in on, where the majority of bets are coming in on, all of your relevant stats, all of your relevant injury news. So, you might not be a big sports bettor, right? Maybe your state, it's not legal and you don't want to go over to, one of these unscrupulous sites, but you can use it for DFS too. You can use it for whatever you want, and it's entirely free. Tyler, click on one of those game pages just so I can pull that up one more time. They have essentially everything. There you go. Look, just the direction of the money line, where the money's going, where the point spread is, where the public money is, everything. Everything's right there. It's awesome. Win likelihood that they're going to win, everything. I don't know, Alex. If you're a bettor or you're even for DFS, there's nothing on this page right here that's not going to help you get where you need to go.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. Like some of the stuff on the game page, like you can see like how much money and what percent of bets are going on each side. As a bettor, like that's huge, because you kind of like market value kind of shapes the lines and where they are. So if 80% of people are betting on one side, it might make sense to take a little contrarian approach in the sports betting too.
All right. So, fellas, we're almost there, and we've got about one more to go here, and then we'll get some final thoughts. Yeah, let me do this first, Steve, because we didn't really hit on them much. The Bears. Is there anything here that gives you even remote confidence that they can keep this game competitive? Because that's going to dictate how this flows and who ends up being good options, whether it's Montgomery, Robinson if he plays, or even Trubisky against a pretty terrifying New Orleans defense.
Yeah, I think they can keep it close. So I think that's definitely something. I do worry that a little bit Darnell Mooney, I think, is also another guy that could potentially sit. So if Robinson and or Mooney both sit, it could really open up the passing game options to Anthony Miller, Javon Wims. Then maybe they wouldn't be able to keep it so close. But I think that with big play opportunities that Allen Robinson offers, David Montgomery has been really good throughout the year. He came in as a guy that I loved at the beginning of the year. He's gained so much popularity throughout the year. He's a little bit over-owned every week nowadays, but he continues to do well despite that. So I think that all the plays on the Bears are not my favorite plays on, because I've talked about a lot of them already on the games we've talked about, but I do think that sprinkling in some Bears into your game plans is pretty good, because I think the Saints can score some points and the Bears will try to keep up.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, you can't love the Bears' chances of winning the game, but the chances of them getting a ton of passing attempts for Allen Robinson are pretty good, because the Bears are already a pass-first team, and then you put them in a game where they're 10-point dogs. So I think that we could see big passing volume. David Montgomery, it's a bit of a red flag, I'd say, that they're 10-point dogs, but you can get it done receiving too to some extent. But he's been on an incredible run, so not really trying to chase those performances, I guess. So Allen Robinson is probably the standout play. And then if Darnell Mooney sits, that could open up some more value with maybe like an Anthony Miller.
Okay. And we know that after Tariq Cohen went down in week 3, David Montgomery hasn't just been the feature back on the ground, but he's ran 330 or 344 routes over that span. That's a pretty nice number, if you ask me. Weeks 4 through 16, I'll take that any day of the week. That's what that's a lot of routes. What's that, like 28 routes per game? That's a ton. So Montgomery is your feature pass catching back as well. Will feature back in all phases, which makes me feel a little bit better about him if you wanted to get there, because I think he's involved no matter what, and there's no chance he gets phased out of this game. 6,900 with the way he's been playing. I'm okay to get there. Steve, Pittsburgh is another scenario where I look at this Steelers team and I see James Conner and a team that wants to run, but just has such an inferior run game that they haven't been able to do it. This week, there's probably in a divisional matchup is a high likelihood that we have a low scoring game. 47-point total is kind of right in the middle. Steelers are 6-point favorites, but I want to start with James Conner and just kind of get your feel for where you go with the guy whose price has bottomed out to start the season or postseason.
Yeah, so Conner has been, really a major disappointment for season-long players, especially in the second half of the season. But I like this spot, especially where his ownership is right now for him. I think they've been, really kind of resting him as they kind of waited out the end of the year. They got out to that really hot start, and they've kind of fizzled down the end. But I think it's kind of been a little bit of a take their foot off the pedal type thing. Unfortunately, they took it off a little bit too much, because now they're playing the first week of the season or of the playoff season. So I think that was a little bit of a mistake. But I do think that given where James Conner's price is now, he's all the way down at 5,000 on DraftKings. His ownership is still not high because of how poor he's been playing and the Pittsburgh Steelers in general have been playing. But I think that gives you a good chance to get some leverage off of these other guys on the slate that are going to be quite high owned, like Derrick Henry, for instance. So I like giving him a shot pretty well, actually.
Tommy Lasorda just died, by the way. That's a tough one. 93 years old, Hall of Fame baseball manager. Alex, your thoughts on the Steelers and Browns game? We got people in chat saying they think it's going to be higher scoring. Might be.
Yeah, the Steelers are a team I love to target for stacking because they don't run the ball very often. They've only run it 35% in neutral game scripts. So when they do get it done, it's usually through the air. Their efficiency is very bad. Roethlisberger's only averaged like 6.3 yards per attempt. I mean, I guess a lot of that's just because they're trying to just take those short throws and just move the ball by a lot of short passes. But that can equal big performances for guys like Deontay Johnson, Claypool, and Juju. So I think they could be a sneaky stack.
Okay. Then I'll go back to you for a second, Steve, before we wrap this up. The passing attack has been an interesting one for the Steelers because, well, Ben Roethlisberger's yards per attempt is nothing to get excited about. They just throw the ball so damn much that it ends up resulting in some pretty big games for guys like Deontay Johnson, whether it's Chase Claypool. He's been a little less impressive lately, but Juju Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron went on a run there where the guy was being targeted like 9 times a game for 7 straight weeks, and he's off the COVID-19 list. It does feel like any chance I get on a small slate to at least have a little bit of exposure to a Pittsburgh stack makes sense, not because I have amazing or great faith in their passing attack, but because I know they're going to usually be forced to throw the football.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that's really interesting about the Steelers is they are all those pass catchers could really blow up the slate at any time because they are pretty explosive, right? So, and you're getting them at low ownerships because pretty much it's tough to know which one is going to really blow up. So all of those guys, Juju, Deontay Johnson, Claypool, Ebron, they're all kind of in the mid tier of ownerships, maybe even a little bit on the lower end. And any of them could, pretty much blow up the slate because they have that big play capability, whether it's after the catch type plays primarily, or potentially every now and then they could have a big deep throw. But primarily they all are quick and have that after the catch type capability. If I had to choose one, I'm probably leaning slightly toward Deontay Johnson. He's been the most consistent throughout the year on his playing time and projects kind of slightly higher. It's priced a little bit higher too, but I don't think the price is going to be a huge deal on this slate. And then Eric Ebron could give you some of that leverage against Mark Andrews that we talked about earlier as well. So he might be the best option to be able to actually keep up with Mark Andrews if we really needed to. So I think I would probably lean towards those two. But if I'm running 3 lineups, I don't think it's a bad idea of having one of the 3 in each of those lineups. Okay.
Hold on a second. I know Ebron was activated from the COVID-19 list, right? So, Alex, wasn't Ebron activated?
Yeah, everything I've seen is that he's playing.
Yeah. All right. So, and by the way, Deontay Johnson did a better job of not dropping footballs the other week. If he can maintain that, the guy is going to be outstanding. So there it is. 2 slates up, 2 slates down. We love you guys for hanging out with us every week, even as we work our way through the postseason. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. It helps us out a ton with the YouTube algorithm and subscriptions as well. Comments in the comment section. If you're watching this after we've gone live, whether you love us, hate us, or you're indifferent, you got something to say, let us know. I read all of the comments and I always try to respond. So all of that stuff goes a long way for us, helps it so we can do better production quality, better hosts and analysts and everything, just to better the product and continue to keep it free here at youtube.com. Alex, final thoughts before we head off for the day and into the weekend.
I think it should be a great weekend. You don't have to get too crazy in NFL short slates, particularly 3 games. I mean, there's like so many different ways to put the pieces together that it's not very difficult to make a unique lineup. So don't go overboard with trying to leave a ton of money on the table or something like that. I don't know if it's necessary. But just finding like interesting ways to combine the players, getting the stacking right, doing stuff like allowing players versus defense, which other people might do. I think those are all some solid ways to kind of get a small edge that adds up.
Steve, I almost forgot. Top pivot, top fade, and our favorite bet of the week. I almost forgot because it doesn't feel like on the contrary. I'll start with you. Instead of asking for your final thoughts, who is your top fade and your top pivot of the week? Full disclosure here, top fade doesn't mean you're going to have none of them on a 3-game slate, but more so that you intend on or think you'll come in underweight on them.
So for pretty much the 18th week of this season, maybe -1 because of the bye, I think I'll go with the top fade of Derrick Henry. One time it has to work.
Can't stop now. Can't stop now.
So we'll go with him, and then the pivot, I will go with the passing attack and say that Corey Davis and/or AJ Brown.
All right. What about you, Alex?
So the top fade, I think on Saturday, let's see here. Man, I'm I got swept up trying to find the top bet here. But my top fade is Dawson Knox. I feel like he's had some big games which have bolstered people's opinions on him. He's one of the more popular tight ends on Saturday. But I'm worried, especially if Beasley plays, that earlier in the season when Brown, Beasley, and Diggs were all healthy, he had very disappointing route counts. So as the chalk tight end, I feel like he might be bad chalk. I'd rather take a shot on maybe, I guess Logan Thomas is the highest owned, but just anyone other than Knox, I feel like could be just as good. So like Jack Doyle has been out on the field a lot the past few weeks. He hasn't really gotten targeted, so that's a bad pivot. My bad. Maybe a Higbee or Everett. They've both been used pretty decently over the past few weeks.
Okay. I'm going to go Chris Carson as my top fade of the week. I assume I'll have some, but 47% is a lot of ownership there. There are a lot of running backs on this slate, all of whom are pretty much underpriced. And, you know, Cam Akers gives you an $800 discount. He's 10% lower projected ownership in the same game. Neither have great matchups, but Akers, when healthy, has been the clear feature back. We don't have to worry about, okay, is Pete Carroll going to give him the full workload for Carson? He might, you know, in the postseason, he definitely might. But there's no reason at all to believe that Cam Akers isn't going to get that in what's probably going to be a low-scoring game that has a lot of rushing attempts. So give me Cam Akers there as the pivot off of the fade, Chris Carson. And our top bets, Alex, you said you've been working hard on it. Give me your top bet for this wildcard weekend. Remember, oddshopper.awesemo.com. You can shop odds from all of these books. Check them all out there. You can set a watch list, notifications to track all of your bets. It's amazing, and it's entirely free.
Yeah, there's so many good ones. If you go to our player props tool, it's almost tough to pick one, but one that I'm seeing that really stands out is Ronald Jones. Receiving yards, the line is 10. He does have this finger issue, which I was a little concerned because he didn't really get very many receptions in Week 17. But he did run routes on 43% of Brady dropbacks, which did indicate they're intending to throw him the ball. Over the season, he's been targeted at a high rate, like you'd expect from a Brady, to check it down. So with one more week to get healthy, I think I like that over on receiving.
Beautiful. What do you got, Steve?
I think I'm going to go with the Bears plus 10, not to win straight up, but to cover the plus 10. At minus 109 on DraftKings, it looks like is the best bet on our Odd Shopper page right now. So I think that's a good place to put it at. I think the Bears are not quite likely to win the game outright, but I do think there's a little bit of inconsistency right now with the Saints. So Kamara hasn't been practicing recently. Michael Thomas hasn't played in quite a while. Drew Brees has been banged up for most of the year. Who knows? They're going to put Taysom Hill in, and he's going to do something crazy that may or may not work out. I think that also the Saints just seem to have a lot of bad luck in the playoffs, and wouldn't it be fitting for them the first time that a number 2 seed is doesn't get the bye, they come in all banged up, and then they would end up losing that game. So I don't foresee, like I said, I don't think that they're going to lose it outright, but I do think that the Bears will keep it closer than what they could, and wouldn't be completely surprised if they do pull the upset.
Okay, I'll close it out. I'm taking the under in Seattle and LA. It's crazy to take a under 42.5, but there's just so many pieces here that make sense for this game to be very low scoring, from either Wolford or Jared Goff, who's not at 100% injured throwing hand, to the fact that the Rams have a top 3 run defense and a top 3 pass defense, to the fact that the Seahawks offense has completely stalled out of late, but their defense has taken a huge step forward following the first half of the season. There's really a lot. Oh, and the fact that divisional games have a higher likelihood of going under as well. Everything points to the under. I know 42.5 is not a lot of points, but if this ends up being 20-17, even like a 17-14 game, something similar to week 17 between the Cardinals and Rams, I would not be shocked. Give me the under, Rams and Seattle. And Steve, since we got Alex's final thoughts, I'll grab yours as well on this slate for Wildcard weekend.
I agree with all the stuff that Alex said, so that was a really great summary. I do think that it's not important to get overly off the board, but I do think it's also important not to get super chalky. So if you check out who our top owned players at each position are, make sure that your lineup doesn't have more than 2 of those of the 5. So, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and including defense. Make sure that you only have 2 of those top 5 in your lineup. If you get outside of that, then I think you're in pretty good shape, and you can be fairly chalky outside of that and make some pretty good lineups. All
right. And one more thing. Follow him at Steve Buzzard. Follow him at Awesemo DFS. Follow me at Loughran_D, LOUGHY_D. Appreciate you guys. Good luck this weekend. And remember, we've got the NBA Deeper Dive coming up, 4:45 today. Alex Baker and Adam Scher. That's followed by Live Before Lock. That's going to be Chris Spaggs and Terry McBride. And then tomorrow, big time content, Live Before Lock, multiple hours stream for NFL football wildcard weekend. Hopefully you'll join us. Catch you back here soon, guys.